Because these birds live so long, it's really important that you have a good diet for them. And there's lots of controversy about what birds should be fed. Traditionally, we fed seed, and this is white proso millet that is the basis for many of the seed mixes, particularly for parakeets. But my cockatiels like it too, and my hyacinth macaw will even eat millet. And interestingly enough, he shells each one of these little seeds just like the smaller birds do. There are many products on the market now that are pellets, and the pelleted diets are ones that are a complete diet of what we know is necessary for birds. But remember, we have over 300 different species of parrot family birds. I think there's a difference in what each one needs to some extent. So while you may go ahead and feed pellets, I don't object to seed either, but in either case, I definitely want you to be feeding table food. Anything you're eating, with the exception of avocado. We hear lots and lots about how they shouldn't eat chocolate, they shouldn't eat coffee, they shouldn't eat lots of things that we tell people they shouldn't eat. But to my knowledge, the only thing that has really been demonstrated to be a serious problem is avocado, and I cannot tell you why. I'd love to know, but I don't feed my birds avocado as a result. Gravel is something that we have a lot of controversy about too. And I have some gravel on the floor of all my cages once a week. If birds want it, they will go down and eat it. If they don't want it, that's fine, no problem. But the gravel that we use is a mixture of charcoal, shells, and gravel, and the shell part of it is important in that it is providing additional calcium, even though we put a cuttlebone in the cage for calcium too. Birds are not really into drinking milk for breakfast like children do, but they need calcium. And so a cuttlebone, which is the backbone of a cuttlefish, is a good source for calcium. The grit or gravel that we feed goes into the gizzard, which is the second part of the stomach structure of a bird. It's real thick-walled, and the grit grinds up seeds in the gizzard just as we do in a mill. Water for these two birds, the parakeet and the cockatiel, is an interesting thing. Lots of people don't think their birds drink. Well, they do. However, sometimes they're getting enough moisture from lettuce, although I prefer kale, not lettuce, or carrots, or some of the other table foods that you're feeding. And as far as I'm concerned, the more table food, the better. One of the funniest things is to watch a parrot holding a handful of spaghetti and eating it with as much enthusiasm as any Italian ever did. The other thing that I am concerned about when we're talking about birds is what to do in an emergency and how to know it's an emergency. Because birds hide their problems as well as they do, it's hard to tell. But if you can look right now at the little cockatiel sitting in the cage, what you'll see is that his feathers are all puffed up. He is somewhat stressed by being in a new environment this morning, and he's a little bit ruffled because his feathers have been handled when I took him in and out of the cage, and so he's puffed. If he were to stay like that all day long, or if I were to come home and my bird would be puffed like that, I would be very concerned. He is retaining heat by puffing his feathers. Chirping like that is a good sign. A bird will chirp. And as you see, he's still trying to figure out how to get the parakeet to feed him. The parakeet's saying, "Are you kidding? This is not what I had in mind today." The puffing of the feathers that you see now and just before is to impress with parakeet with what a baby the little cockatiel is. I don't think the parakeet's buying it. And you may notice the parakeet, who's a little bit older, is certainly not puffing and expecting the cockatiel to feed him. When he stretches, he also relaxes his feathers a bit. And when we would take him out of the cage, or tell him we're going to by opening the door, one of the first things he's going to do, I think, is tighten up his feathers. Turn around so everybody can see you with your feathers tight. Thank you very much. Okay? And if we go ahead and take him on out of the cage, why, you'll see that his feathers are relaxed, but not puffed, and his head is definitely not tucked under his wing, which is a sure sign that you have a problem. Another sign of problem is when you come home and the bird is sitting on the floor of the cage. Now, this time of year, when it's springtime, I always suggest that the first thing you do is put a heating pad underneath the cage. Heat on the bottom of the cage, if the bird is sitting down there, will enable it to deal with whatever's going on. And I love the people that call me back in the morning and say, well, it laid an egg. And I say, yes, your little male cockatiel is a girl, and it also was sitting on the floor like that because they do sit on the floor when they're getting ready to lay an egg, usually, hopefully, in a nest box that you've provided for them. Okay, so let's look a little bit at this one while he's out, or she is out. And you remember they're always attracted to jewelry, so let's switch hands here so that you'll pay attention to what we're talking about. When you're looking at a bird, the first thing to look at is its face. Look at its little eyes. And if its eyes are bright and shiny like this one, you have a good set of eyes. If they're crusty, or if one is closed, look at it much more closely and be sure that you don't have an eye infection. The eyes of a bird are very large relative to the size of the head, and in the head there's also extensive sinuses. Sometimes you have a respiratory infection that you can actually see because the eye is not looking quite right. The floor of your cage is another thing you need to look at. Sweetie Pie, my finger isn't going to feed you either, even though you're a lovely hand-fed bird. And so let's look at what you would see on the floor of a cage that has had a parakeet in it. Actually, this tray came from a cage that had 2 parakeets in it. And those 2 parakeets produced this many droppings, plus a few more, overnight. You can expect about 40 droppings a day from your little parakeet. These droppings look great. They're a nice little package with the center white and the outside dark. And that tells me that that cage has has perfectly healthy little parakeets in it. I look at my trays every morning. I brought another tray paper in for you to look at. And this particular tray paper looks very different, doesn't it? So if this was a tray from a parakeet cage, I'd be really questioning what was going on. But this is a perfectly normal dropping from 2 finches. The thing you may notice is that there's a lot more droppings. Yes, that's right, they have more droppings than a parakeet does. So you need to know your own bird. A cockatiel may have slightly fewer droppings. Each bird that you take home as a pet, the first week is going to be a little nervous and your droppings aren't going to look quite this nice. But as time goes by, you'll get used to what to expect from the droppings from your bird. If you have any hesitation about what's going on with your bird in the way of a health issue, the very first thing to do is provide extra heat. Put a heating pad under the cage and then call the vet. An avian veterinarian is one who has been trained to see birds because they're not the same as dogs and cats. And so you always need to call and say, will the vet see birds? And then if you are particularly concerned, you need to ask if they're avian board certified. There aren't very many of those, so you may have to go quite a way to find one. But many of the vets who see lots and lots of birds are perfectly competent to handle any routine issues that come up with your bird. We think because birds live so long, it's important for you to know about their food, about their care, and be completely comfortable with what you do with your birds. Thank you for visiting.